As I patiently wait for the first official teaser trailer for Zootropolis 2 to release, I spend my time wondering if and how Disney can build themselves up back to the top of their game, to how they were pre-Ralph Breaks the Internet. Because although I do have my issues with what Disney has become over the last few years, I do believe that they can bring themselves back to that level of greatness that they were once known for. 18 months ago, I made a quick video after the teaser trailer for Inside Out 2 came out, explaining how, although I've never fully been on the train of Pixar sucks now, I did believe that, if anything, Inside Out 2 would be the one to put them back on the map. And, for the most part, I was right. Many people loved Inside Out 2, myself included, and although it wasn't quite as good as the original, it was the first Pixar movie in a little while to have that sense of familiarity, that feeling of classic Pixar that we thrived off of as kids. But that sentiment can really only be said about Pixar. When people talk about how Disney is boring and woke and unoriginal, Pixar often unfairly gets lumped into that discussion because, while yes, Pixar has had some rough spots over the years, the same can be said about pretty much all film companies, especially Disney. I tend to separate Pixar from Disney because, looking back over the last few years, I just don't think Pixar has had quite as rough a time as its parent company, seeing as it managed to produce what was, until about 2 months ago, the highest grossing animated film of all time. And I know that a film's quality is not at all equivalent to how much money it makes, but Inside Out 2 is objectively a good movie. You can feel what you want about it, but you can't deny the love and effort that went into it. And I absolutely hate it when people accuse Pixar of being unoriginal, as if 6 of the 7 movies they've made over the last 5 years aren't originals. The same, however, cannot exactly be said about Disney, though I'm just going to say, if I'm being honest, I haven't seen the new Snow White, and I don't plan to, but from what I have heard about it, it does sound bad, but not nearly bad enough that it should warrant a 1.6 score on IMDb, so that makes me believe that some people who haven't seen it are just review bombing it for the sake of it, although again, I don't know, I haven't seen it myself. So maybe it is just that terrible, I don't know. But I recently watched Moana 2 on Disney Plus with my family, and I'd be lying if I said I was disappointed, seeing as I wasn't expecting much from it anyway, but it did make me reminisce on the Disney movies that I went to the cinema and watched on Blu-ray on repeat growing up as a Disney kid in the 2010s. 3 of my favourite films of all time are Inside Out, Zootropolis and Moana, all of which came out within 18 months of each other from 2015 to 16. And I also find it interesting that by the end of this year, Inside Out 2, Moana 2 and Zootropolis 2 will have also come out within that same time span. After Inside Out 2 more than delivered in terms of what I would want from a sequel to the movie which helped shape me into the person I am today, and then Moana 2 was the very definition of fine, I am holding out my hopes for Zootropolis 2 to be further proof that Disney is simply going through a rough spot at this moment in time, and that when Zootropolis 2 releases in November 2025, people will maybe possibly ever so slightly tone it down a bit on the narrative that Disney is the worst, and that they are the perfect example of the disappointing mess that humanity has become simply because they haven't won an Oscar in 3 years. Disney has been through rough spots in the past. I know they still have it in them to make movies at the same level they used to. Could Zootropolis 2 potentially be the one to bring us back to even the slightest glimpse of the company we grew up with? Maybe, but how exactly? It has been 9 years since Zootropolis was released in cinemas on the 4th of March in the US and the 25th of March in the UK in 2016. And yes, I am calling it Zootropolis because 1, I'm British, and 2, Zootropolis is a better name in my opinion because the name Zootopia implies that it's a utopia, which further implies that the city is perfect, which is not, which is the point, I know, because that's how Judy sees it, and also how the majority of citizens want outsiders to see it. But Zootropolis implies that it's simply a metropolis for animals, which it 100% is. Funny story, I actually had a very unique experience with Zootropolis at the cinema, because the cinema actually played the first 20 minutes of Alvin and the Chipmunks before coming in and telling everyone that there had been some kind of slip-up, and that we ought to go downstairs as quickly as possible before the correct film started playing in a different screen. Anyway, in those 9 years, it has created a legacy for itself, including but not limited to making $1 billion at the box office, themes and messages about diversity and prejudice, an Oscar win, a miniseries, books, toys, theme park lands, an online fan community, fan fiction, an abortion comic, video games, cakes, meet and greets, cameos, and coming soon to a cinema near you, a sequel. And although I admit I am biased, I do believe that all of the love and appreciation for this movie, regardless of how messed up some of it may be, is very much deserved. Like Inside Out, Zootropolis is a movie which I've been able to appreciate even more as I've gotten older, in both its messaging and its meta references to old Hollywood and society in general. As a struggling 8-year-old Disney kid with a new kitten and 3 pet rabbits at home, a Disney film with a bunny as a protagonist instantly appealed to me. In fact, I was so convinced that I was going to love the film that I was willing to get a Judy Hopps plushie before I'd even seen the film, though luckily my parents talked them sense into me. And when I eventually did see the film the next day, 8-year-old me was blown away, and it wasn't long before I got that plushie. 9 years later, I still have my Judy Hopps plushie with me, and I 100% headcanon her and Joy from Inside Out to be best friends, since they are similar characters in the sense that they both have a vague goal, Judy wanting to make the world a better place, and Joy wanting Riley to be happy. However, they try so desperately to achieve these goals, they don't even think too much about how it would affect the people around them, and they don't even realise their own subconscious biases against the people they're stuck with on a journey. Zootropolis has quite an active online fan community, and there are a few reasons for this. One of them is the acknowledgement of the furry community, but also because of how well it stood the test of time. If you were to ask me why the trio of Inside Out, Zootropolis and Moana in particular meant so much to me, my answer back then would simply be that I liked them. But if you were to ask me nowadays, I think my answer would be more about how animated movies, especially from Disney and Pixar, gave me a sense of escapism. It's not like I had a rough childhood or anything, I was perfectly happy with my home life. But I've always been quite a socially awkward person, and back then it was at a whole other level. Disney and Pixar movies always give me something to look forward to, something to obsess over the next 6 months. And the thing is, I actually do think it would still appeal to me if it came out today. Some people like to write off animated films as being kids' films, but I think that's BS because it's a family film, which means it should appeal to people of all ages, and even so, kids deserve films like Zootropolis. Kids deserve films that will teach them valuable lessons. That is something they actually have to pay attention to in order to properly understand, because kids are a lot more intelligent than people give them credit for. Plus, Zootropolis was exactly the kind of film I needed to come out halfway through year 4, because it wasn't like we would have gotten Inside Out 2 anytime soon back then. Although I was too young to understand the deeper meanings and messages of the film back then, but it has become something that I've come to value as I've gotten older. And to think that the original plot was going to be so much darker. I've seen a lot of videos coming up discussing the original plot of Zootropolis, and in some cases people arguing as to how this original plot could have made the film into one of the all-time Disney classics. Well, to me, Zootropolis is already an all-time Disney classic, and it's one of those films that I just can't bring myself to criticise because I can only see it in that perfect mould that it was originally presented to me in. I know that probably makes me a terrible film student if there are some films I am incapable of critiquing, but if the film were to come out nowadays, I probably would be able to pick up on the details that people discuss in these types of videos. So what I'm going to do is go over some of the scrap ideas for the first film, and think about how these ideas could be beneficial to the plot of the sequel, or any other Zootropolis-based projects Disney might want to use them for. So originally, Zootropolis was supposed to have Nick Wilde as the main character, where his dream is to open up an amusement park called Wild Times. For added context, all the predators in Zootropolis had to wear tame collars, which would give them an electric shock if they showed any sort of strong emotion, good or bad. The Blu-ray shows a couple of deleted scenes from when the story was told from Nick's perspective, which you can tell from certain aspects, such as the way Judy speaks of her family, and also how she perceives some of the darker aspects of the city. The taming collar idea was scrapped because the directors, Rick Moore and Brian Howard, wanted the audience to actually like the city that the movie is named after, which makes complete sense to me. These taming collars look absolutely brutal, and I wonder if the Disney Channel original movie Zombies took inspiration from this, but there are 2 deleted scenes in particular that highlight how much of a burden these taming collars are to the predators, especially in one where Nick and Judy witness a young, innocent polar bear receiving his taming collar, unaware of the devastation that is to come for him as a result of being treated as an outcast that he's going to experience for the rest of his life.
With this collar, Zootopia accepts you.
With this color, Zootopia accepts me. Thank you, Baba.
Another example is the scene where Nick gets his taming collar removed, ever so briefly for a medical checkup, and those few seconds of euphoria that he experienced as a free predator shows just how bad these taming collars are, and I understand why this idea was scrapped. However, I also understand people who suggest this plotline could have elevated Zootropolis to a level that modern Disney just feels afraid of going to. That's why I feel like Zootropolis 2 could deal with these ideas, not exactly sure how, but it would certainly be an interesting direction to go in. If they wanted to be really dark, then they could fast forward several years from the first movie and make Zootropolis into a dystopian wasteland where the conspiracy theories that Bellwether was trying to convince everyone with actually end up being true, and as a result society has gone backwards. Actually, that's not so far off from real life, so it would make sense, but Zootropolis is a family film, so I know that's very unlikely. So now I'm going to look at some of the deleted characters who I wonder could be given some sort of second life in a sequel. And what I mean by that is, for example, there was this one Honey Badger character who was supposed to be a sort of doomsday prepper who didn't end up in the final film in that form, but instead she was redesigned as the Doctor that is caught with Mayor Lionheart. So looking at some of these other deleted characters which the directors tell us about in the Blu-ray featurette, we also have the Gerbil Jerks, who seem to be these getaway drivers, an old goat, the original villain Mayor Swinton, and Woody the sheep, who wears corsets and masks to disguise themselves into a nefarious sheep in wolf's clothing. Now, since we've left the original film with both mayors of Zootropolis in jail, this could be a great opportunity to use this scrapped mayor character. She doesn't have to necessarily be the villain, but it could be an interesting Easter egg of sorts for those who know that this character existed beforehand. I also think the reverse joke of there being a sheep in wolf's clothing could be a fun joke, since they did also include a blink and you'll miss it sheep in wolf's clothing at the end of the first film. Now that we've finished discussing what could be, let's talk about what we actually do know, which isn't as much as I'd like to at this point, 7 months away from the movie's release date, but what we do know is that they will be tackling one of the main questions people left the first movie wondering. What about reptiles? Well, I've always felt a particular way about people who, even in the most well-established universes, are always asking, what about this and what about that? And the thing is, there are always going to be some questions about the world in which a movie is set, related to the logistics of certain things, such as the exclusions of other groups within a certain demographic, in this case, reptiles, birds, fish, etc. And Zootropolis clearly shut anyone up with these types of questions by making it clear that Zootropolis is a city where all mammals can live in harmony, which cleverly leaves several avenues open for a sequel which could potentially tackle this very topic. And from the very little we do know about the plot of Zootropolis 2, they will be exploring the inclusion of reptiles into Zootropolis' landscape. We have this snake character, Gary, who will be played by Kei-Ho Kwan, and we also have Quinta Brunson and Fortune Feimster joining the cast as a beaver and a quokka therapist respectively. Now, I'm not exactly sure what role this beaver will play in the movie, but we do know that this therapist is assisting Nick and Judy through partner therapy, and I and many others were hoping that it would actually be couple therapy, but unfortunately that doesn't seem to be the case as far as we know. It does seem that the snake, Gary, is somewhat of a revelation within the city, and there will be a new location within the city known as Marsh Market, which includes semi-aquatic creatures. I personally am excited to see if this film does decide to explore more about Nick and Judy's relationship, since this case is said to test the limits of their relationship, pretty standard sequel plot, which may or may not deepen to beyond just a friendship. This is something which I love about the way Disney has presented their relationship thus far, since it is a very common discussion amongst different parts of the fandom, whether people ship Nick and Judy or whether they just prefer them as friends. But I am really excited to see how this is handled in the sequel, whether Disney wants to go there or not, because it does seem that the directors are open to interspecies relationships within this world. Disney shouldn't be afraid of love stories. They've managed to create some of the greatest love stories in all of cinema, including in the 21st century. Rapunzel and Eugene are like the greatest Disney couple ever. As to answer the question, can Zootropolis 2 save Disney? I don't know. I hope so. I do believe in Disney. I really do. I just think they've made some truly questionable decisions over the last couple of years. I think Disney can learn from the mistakes they made with Moana 2 and use them to make Zootropolis 2 better. Firstly, Zootropolis 2 was always going to be a movie. Moana 2 was not. There we go. Problem 1 fixed. There are some stories that work better as a film and some that work better as a series. The problem with Moana 2 was that it just didn't feel like a Moana 2. It felt like a setup for Moana 2, whereas this should feel like a Zootropolis 2. Zootropolis was also not a musical, so we don't need to worry about the songs being mediocre. I heard something about there being a new Shakira/Gazelle song, which I'm hoping will be at the same level as Try Everything, a song which heavily influenced me back then, but even if it's not the end of the world as long as the rest of the film makes up for it. It also needs to develop these new characters instead of just giving them one character trait that they are stuck with and that we have to deal with. Also, don't keep the two protagonists apart for the first 50 minutes. I do believe that objectively there is no such thing as a perfect film. However, everyone's idea of a perfect film is different. One of the many problems with getting older as a film enthusiast is losing the ability to see something as instantly perfect the first time you watch it. And like I said earlier, if Zootropolis were to come out now, I probably wouldn't see it in that same perfect light that I first saw it in. Even if it isn't as good as the original, which it most likely won't be, as long as it gives people young and old the same kind of fun it gave me and so many others when the original was released, and maybe managing to get $1 billion and an Oscar nomination wouldn't hurt as well. And maybe they'll open up more avenues for Zootropolis 3 through 7.5 in 2069, where Nick and Julie's hybrid child becomes a pop star and flies off into space for 11 minutes to announce their next tour set list. Just an idea. Perhaps Zootropolis 2 will put Disney back on the map. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. Sorry for the sudden change in audio quality, but I've been waiting several weeks for this bloody trailer to come out, and so I decided to give up. So I'm just going to end the video here, let you guys think what you want about it. I reckon that they're probably holding off of releasing the trailer because of Lilo and Stitch. They probably don't want to overshadow Lilo and Stitch. They're probably going to wait until after then. So yeah, that's that. We'll have to wait and see until the trailer comes out, and maybe I might make a follow-up video when the trailer comes out. I don't know. Maybe I'll have to wait and see. Also, if you love films just as much as I do, then you should go and check out Matinee to Midnight. This is a podcast hosted by my father and his best friend. It is coming out in a couple of months, but you can follow them on Instagram. And it is, seriously, I'm not just being biased, it is a great podcast, so you better go check it out because they put a lot of effort into it, and I really think it really could be the next big thing. So yeah, thank you for watching, like, subscribe, all that stuff. See you next time.